Now let us move to an essential topic: acting companies and performance practices in Shakespearean theatre. First, we look at Shakespeare's own acting company. Lord Chamberlain's Men was the company to which William Shakespeare belonged. This was one of the most successful and popular acting groups of the time. Later, when James I of England came to the throne, the company received royal patronage and was renamed King's Men. This royal support increased their status and influence in the theatrical world. Now, let us understand the acting style. Acting during this period was highly expressive and rhetorical. Since there were no microphones or advanced stage technology, actors had to depend on their voice, clarity of speech, and powerful delivery. Language was the main tool through which meaning was conveyed. Also, there were minimal props on stage. Because of this, actors used words to create vivid images in the minds of the audience. The audience imagined settings, actions, and emotions through dialogue rather than visual effects. So, the key exam insight here is that acting depended more on verbal imagery than visual realism. The power of performance came from speech, not from stage decoration. Finally, let us look at female roles. Women were not allowed to act on stage during Shakespeare's time. As a result, female characters were played by young boys. These boys were trained to perform women's roles convincingly, including voice and gestures. This point is very important for exams, especially when discussing gender representation and performance. It shows how theatre reflected social restrictions of the time, while still creating powerful and complex female characters through performance. So, overall, Shakespearean acting was skillful, language-driven, and deeply connected to the social structure of the period. Now let us understand one of the most important concepts in Shakespearean theatre, the idea of universality. William Shakespeare wrote plays that could appeal to all levels of society at the same time. His audience included both educated elites and common people, and he had to satisfy everyone in a single performance. This ability is often called multi-layered dramaturgy. It means that his plays operate on different levels simultaneously, offering different kinds of meaning to different audiences. For example, in a single scene, we may find philosophical ideas and deep reflections that appeal to educated viewers. At the same time, the same scene may include humor, wordplay, or physical comedy that entertains common people. This combination is not accidental. Shakespeare carefully designed his plays so that no section of the audience felt excluded. Everyone could find something engaging and meaningful. So, the key exam line to remember is this: Shakespeare's theatre is both popular and intellectual. This concept of universality is one of the main reasons why his plays have remained relevant across time and cultures. They speak to different kinds of audiences at once, making them rich, complex, and widely appreciated. Now let us explore a very interesting concept: the idea of theatre as illusion. In Shakespearean theatre, the audience was fully aware that what they were watching was not real. The stage was simple, the props were minimal, and the actors were clearly performing roles. Yet, despite knowing this, the audience still became emotionally involved in the story. This is the power of theatrical illusion. The audience willingly accepted the performance as if it were real, allowing themselves to feel emotions like joy, sorrow, fear, and excitement. William Shakespeare often made this idea even more explicit. He sometimes reminded the audience that they were watching a play. This technique is very important because it shows a conscious awareness of theatre as performance. A famous example comes from the play As You Like It, where the line, "All the world's a stage," suggests that life itself is like a performance, and people are like actors playing roles. This leads us to an important exam concept: meta-theatre or self-reflexivity. These terms refer to moments when a play draws attention to its own theatrical nature, reminding the audience that it is a constructed performance. So, the key idea is that Shakespeare not only created illusion but also played with it. He allowed the audience to enjoy the story while also making them aware of the art of theatre itself. Now let us understand the role of patronage, which was crucial for the survival of theatre in Shakespeare's time. Theatre did not exist independently. It depended heavily on the support of powerful figures, especially the monarchy. Without this support, theatre might not have survived at all. First, under Elizabeth I, theatre was allowed to grow and develop. Although there were criticisms and opposition, especially from religious groups, her reign provided a relatively stable environment in which drama could flourish. Next, under James I of England, this support became even stronger. He became the official patron of Shakespeare's acting company, which was then called King's Men. This royal patronage gave the company prestige, protection, and financial stability. Because of this support, theatre companies were able to perform openly and gain recognition as legitimate cultural institutions. Now, an important exam trap to remember is this. Without patronage, theatre might have been banned much earlier. There was strong opposition, especially from the Puritans, who viewed theatre as immoral. So, the key idea is that patronage was not just support, it was protection. It allowed theatre to survive, grow, and become one of the most important cultural forces of the time. Now let us look at an important controlling force in Shakespearean theatre, censorship. Before any play could be performed, it had to be approved by an official authority. This shows that theatre was not completely free, it was closely monitored by the state. The key figure responsible for this was the Master of the Revels. This official had the power to examine plays before performance and decide whether they were suitable for the public. If a play contained anything considered dangerous or inappropriate, it could be censored, altered, or even completely banned. Now, what kinds of topics were considered sensitive? First, politics. Any content that could be seen as criticizing the monarchy or questioning authority was strictly controlled. Second, religion. Since religion was a serious and often controversial issue during this period, any disrespectful or conflicting representation could lead to censorship. So, the important exam keyword here is state control over theatre. This reminds us that theatre was not just entertainment, it was also a medium that could influence people's thoughts, and therefore it had to be regulated. This system of censorship shows the balance between creativity and authority in Shakespeare's time. While playwrights had great imaginative power, they still had to work within certain limits set by the state. Now let us understand an often overlooked but very important aspect of Shakespeare's writing, the time constraint under which he worked. William Shakespeare was not writing plays at a slow or relaxed pace. He was writing for a theatre industry that demanded continuous performance. Acting companies needed new plays regularly to keep the audience interested and maintain their income. Because of this constant demand, Shakespeare did not have the luxury of long revision or perfect editing. Plays were written quickly and moved almost immediately to performance. Now, this explains two important features in his works. First, inconsistencies. Sometimes we may notice small errors in plot details, character development, or timeline. These are not necessarily mistakes of ignorance, but results of rapid writing under pressure. Second, repetition. Certain ideas, phrases, or themes are repeated in the plays. This was partly due to the need to make the content clear and memorable for the audience, but also because there was limited time to refine and polish every line. So, the key insight to remember for exams is this. Shakespeare wrote under commercial pressure, not purely artistic freedom. This means his plays were shaped not only by creativity but also by practical needs of the theatre business. Understanding this helps us read his works more realistically and appreciate the conditions under which they were produced. Now let us move to the Shakespearean audience, which is one of the most important aspects in understanding how his plays worked. First, we look at the composition of the audience. The audience was divided mainly into two groups. The first group was the Groundlings. These were poor people who stood in the yard, also called the pit. They paid only 1 penny to watch the play. Because they were standing and closely packed, they were usually very noisy and highly interactive. They reacted immediately to what was happening on stage. The second group was the nobility and aristocrats. These people sat in the galleries above. They paid higher prices and expected more refined and meaningful entertainment. They were more concerned with language, themes, and deeper ideas in the play. Now, the key point to remember is this. William Shakespeare wrote for all classes at the same time. His plays had to satisfy both the groundlings and the elite audience, which is why they contain both humor and serious thought. Next, let us look at audience behavior. Unlike modern audiences, people in Shakespeare's time were very interactive. They did not sit quietly. They would cheer, boo, laugh loudly, and sometimes even throw objects if they disliked something. They also ate and drank during the performance. So, an important unknown fact to remember is that the theatre atmosphere was more like a modern stadium than a silent hall. It was energetic, noisy, and full of reactions. Finally, let us consider the time of performances. Plays were usually performed in the afternoon. This was because there was no artificial lighting available in large public theatres. Performances depended entirely on natural daylight. So, overall, the Shakespearean audience was diverse, active, and demanding, and this had a direct influence on how plays were written and performed. Now let us understand how Shakespeare used language to connect with his audience. William Shakespeare carefully designed his language based on the type of audience he was addressing within the play. First, he used prose for common people. Prose is simple, everyday language without a fixed rhythm. It was mainly used in comic scenes and for characters like servants, clowns, or ordinary individuals. This made the dialogue easy to understand and relatable for the general audience. On the other hand, he used verse, especially iambic pentameter, for noble and serious characters. This form has a rhythmic and poetic structure, which made it suitable for kings, queens, and important dramatic moments. It added dignity, depth, and emotional intensity to the dialogue. So, a simple way to remember this is, comic scenes are usually in prose, while serious scenes are often in verse. Now let us move to direct address, which is another powerful technique. Shakespeare often used soliloquies and asides to create a direct connection between the actor and the audience. In a soliloquy, a character speaks their thoughts aloud while alone on stage, allowing the audience to understand their inner feelings. In an aside, a character briefly speaks directly to the audience, often revealing secrets or hidden intentions. A famous example is from Hamlet, where Hamlet delivers the "to be or not to be" speech. In this moment, the audience is directly connected to his inner conflict and philosophical thinking. So, the key exam insight is that the audience becomes psychologically involved. They are not just watching the action, they are drawn into the minds of the characters. This shows how Shakespeare used language not just for communication, but as a powerful tool to engage different sections of the audience and create a deep emotional connection. Now let us understand how Shakespeare carefully selected and balanced themes to suit different types of audiences. William Shakespeare did not write plays with only one type of theme. Instead, he combined multiple themes in a single play so that it could appeal to different sections of society at the same time. First, the theme of revenge. This was very popular among the common audience because it involved action, conflict, and dramatic tension. People enjoyed the excitement and emotional intensity of revenge plots. Next, the theme of love. Love had universal appeal. It attracted all kinds of audiences because it is a common human experience. Whether rich or poor, everyone could connect with stories of love, relationships, and emotions. Then, we have power and politics. These themes were especially appealing to the elite audience. They involved ideas about kingship, authority, governance, and ambition, which were more intellectually engaging and relevant to the upper classes. Finally, comedy. Comedy was enjoyed by all classes. It provided relief, entertainment, and laughter, making it a unifying element in Shakespeare's plays. Now let us look at some examples. In Hamlet, we see a combination of philosophy and revenge. The play appeals both to intellectual thinkers and to those who enjoy dramatic action. In Othello, the focus is on emotion and jealousy, which creates a deep emotional connection with the audience. In Macbeth, themes of ambition and the supernatural are combined, making the play both psychologically intense and visually engaging. So, the key idea to remember is that Shakespeare balanced themes very carefully. He ensured that his plays could entertain, educate, and engage all types of audiences at the same time. Now let us examine how the physical position of the audience affected their psychological experience. In Shakespearean theatre, especially in places like the Globe Theatre, the Groundlings stood very close to the stage. There was no large gap or separation between actors and audience as we see in modern theatres. Because of this closeness, actors could directly interact with the audience. In some cases, they could even physically reach out or move very near to the spectators. More importantly, they could speak directly to them through dialogue, asides, and gestures. This created an immediate and powerful emotional connection. The audience did not feel like distant observers, they felt like active participants in the performance. They were drawn into the action, reacting instantly to what was happening on stage. So, the key exam line to remember is this: Shakespearean theatre breaks the fourth wall. This means there was no invisible barrier separating actors from the audience. Instead, there was constant interaction, making the theatrical experience more engaging, dynamic, and psychologically intense. Now let us understand one of the most distinctive features of Shakespearean theatre, the absence of scenery and the importance of imagination. In Shakespeare's time, there were no elaborate sets or realistic backgrounds. The stage was simple, and there were no visual changes to show different locations. Instead, the audience had to imagine the setting through the words spoken by the actors. For example, if an actor said something like, "This is the forest," the audience would immediately accept it and visualize the scene in their minds. This shows the power of language in creating imagery. So, the key exam keyword here is verbal scenography. This means that the setting and environment are created through words rather than physical scenery. Now let us look at an advanced concept: the heavens. In theatres like the Globe Theatre, the roof above the stage was called the heavens. It was often painted like the sky, with stars and celestial designs. This was not just decorative, it had symbolic meaning. It represented cosmic order and divine presence, and it was often used in supernatural or symbolic scenes. Next, we have the hell mouth concept, which comes from medieval theatre traditions. The trapdoor on the stage was sometimes seen as an entrance to hell. It was used for the dramatic appearance of ghosts, spirits, or devils. This idea connects Shakespearean theatre to earlier medieval morality plays, where such symbolic elements were common. So, overall, the absence of physical scenery did not limit Shakespearean theatre. Instead, it strengthened the role of imagination, symbolism, and language, making the audience an active participant in creating the world of the play. Now let us look at a very important comparison: unity versus flexibility in drama. The idea of unity comes from Aristotle, who explained three main unities in drama. These are unity of time, unity of place, and unity of action. Unity of time means that the events of a play should happen within a single day. Unity of place means that the play should occur in one location only. Unity of action means that the play should focus on one main plot without too many subplots. However, William Shakespeare did not strictly follow these rules. First, he ignored the unity of place. His plays move from one location to another, for example, from a palace to a battlefield or from one country to another. Second, he also ignored the unity of time. Events in his plays often take place over several days, months, or even years. However, he followed the unity of action more loosely. While there is usually a central plot, he often included subplots that run parallel to the main story. These subplots add depth, contrast, and complexity to the play. So, the key idea is that Shakespeare preferred flexibility over strict rules. He focused more on engaging the audience and developing rich storytelling rather than following classical limitations. This is a very important comparison question in exams. You can clearly show that while Aristotle emphasized strict structure, Shakespeare expanded dramatic possibilities by breaking those rules. Now let us explore two important aspects. First, the role of clowns and fool characters, and second, the gap between printing and performance. Let us begin with clowns and fools. In Shakespearean theatre, These characters were not just for entertainment. They played a very important role in the structure of the play. Their first function was to provide comic relief. In serious or tragic scenes, they helped reduce tension and gave the audience a moment of relaxation. But more importantly, they also offered social criticism. Through humor, they could comment on society, authority, and human behavior in ways that other characters could not. For example, characters like Fester in Twelfth Night and the Fool in King Lear speak truths that others avoid. They appear humorous, but their words often carry deep meaning. So, the key exam insight is this: the fool is a truth-teller in disguise. Through jokes and wit, they reveal important realities. Now let us move to the second part, the printing versus performance gap. Shakespeare's plays were originally meant for performance, not for reading. William Shakespeare wrote his works to be acted on stage, where voice, movement, and audience interaction played a major role. Printed versions of the plays came later. These versions were sometimes inaccurate because they were based on memory, incomplete scripts, or unauthorized copies. This creates what we call the gap between performance and text. What was performed on stage may not always exactly match what was later printed. This is very important for textual criticism, where scholars study different versions of the text to understand which one is closest to the original. So, the key idea is that Shakespeare's plays are living performances first and written text second. Understanding this difference helps us analyze his works more effectively.